Wanderer explained that the mist has hallucinatory effects. Those same hallucinations also contain the deepest emotions of Simulanka Durin, to which only Wanderer gets to witness, meaning that the fainting visual hint in the Ignition teaser was a hallucination scene, and the one getting the hallucination is... Let me just say that Simulanka has given rise to the letter M. Well, apart from M being the goddess of fate, it's with the letter M that we'll manage to take a peek on what could be brewing over there in Natlan.
So on behalf of the Hexenzirkel, I will be this video's Mage M. Not only because we'll be brewing some magic, no, don't forget that M also stands for mercanique, just to clarify. We're not just brewing here, this is also gonna be the M for Master Chef. So prepare your cooking weapons and your ingredient magic spells as I welcome you into the 5th episode of Deep Dive, where we dive deep into learning how to master the art of conflict resolution.
And so we've had our fair share of good and bad or even rushed conflicts in Genshin. You know, this has been the main point of why the traveler journeys to the 7 nations. The pattern always stays the same. We visit the nation for the first time, then we get to know the locals, then we get some tidbits on how the main problem is going on, then we get into work by trying to solve the problem only for things to pick up with an involvement of some Fatui Harbinger, then we deal with this Fatui Harbinger in some way, may it be cooperating, fighting, or arguing. And finally, we resolve the problem by beating the first weekly boss in that region, and we get some crumbs of lore in the Archon Quest's epilogue. However, conflicts don't just happen out of nowhere. Usually, there is a gradual ramp up of lore teas from our conversation from event NPCs, for example. But just before every new region drops, we get a patch that features a limited time exclusive map, and its event stories foreshadow the themes and potential source of conflict for the upcoming region. The first Golden Apple Archipelago patch introduced us to Magu Kenki as a preface to Inazuma. The rerun more or less foreshadowed the Sub-Zero Samsara with the uses of mirages and dreams. The Veluria Mirage hinted about Fontanians originally existing as Oceanids. Now we have Simulanka, which by the gist of it possibly explores Natlan's notion of fate. In fact, I do think that if we base things on Simulanka, the conflict in Natlan is much more centered around the true fate that Mavuika intends to forge, especially since in the afterword, it was foreshadowed that Dragonspine Durin will be revived as a parallel result of the Simulanka counterpart. And the same parallel link has gotten emphasis in the conversation between B and M, where M was warned that if she uses the same Durin for the fictional character, it will likely share the fate of his real-world counterpart. If we rehash, the real-world Durin was said to have had a gentle heart, and that he dreamed of befriending the people of Mondstadt. But during the Cataclysm, Durin wreaked havoc in Mondstadt, although being quote-unquote unconscious of his destructive actions. As a result, he was taken down by Barbados and Dvalin on behalf of the people of Mondstadt, the same group of people that he wished to befriend. In Simulanka, we were shown a flashback where Durin launched an attack in Constellation Metropole. We also get to know that Durin had the desire to live alongside the people, and he has even made a friend to which, just like most outcast tropes, the friend's mother and other people expressed their disdain towards him for being an evil dragon. These two instances of Durin sure had their stories look alike, but I hope I'm not the only one to notice it, because in the comparison we just made, there is quite a sneaky discrepancy to the Durin in Simulanka. If you remember the recurring prophecy in Simulanka, it explained that the hero from another world, supported by their companions, shall restore peace to this world. The phrasing was so carefully crafted that it didn't even mention the evil dragon. We only got to be aware of the evil dragon as we deduced the culprit behind what's been going wrong as we progress in Simulanka. And even upon knowing about the evil dragon, we didn't even get to know right away that his name is Durin. That is because the name Durin isn't directly referenced in the Simulanka prophecy. The prophecy rather sets him up as the evil dragon, as a subliminal hint with the existence of the hero from another world. And as we all know, this hero was our boy Wanderer. In the third act of the story, Wanderer tells us that the fog has a hallucinatory effect, and during our multiple confrontations with the evil dragon, we get to experience these same hallucinatory effects to the perspective of Wanderer. As the hero in the prophecy, he was the one to see the conversation between B and M, the evil dragon story, and what prompted him to cause destruction. In the last confrontation, Wanderer had him remember about his name Durin, to which the following events lead to the resolution. And from these, we could say that in Simulanka, Durin served a pivotal purpose as a name. And I think M knew what she was doing with the namesake despite B's warning as the goddess of prophecy. Consequently, we get to know that the turn of events in Simulanka have begun manifesting in Teyvat. We now have our first two clues in speculating Natlan's potential source of conflict, and it lies on the words names and prophecy. If you've watched my last video where I discussed Natlan's ideal of war, you must have come across my explanation on how name ties with the overall theme of Natlan. And I guess it remains to be prominent because it's constantly being thrown into association with Natlan. Like the pyro agate gemstone mentions it. The ignition teaser description also has it. Heck, even the title itself blatantly featured the word name. So what is the deal with name and how does it tie with Natlan's potential conflict? Let's go back to Simulanka and the name Durin. B gave M a warning due to the name being tied to the fate of Dragonspine Durin. And as expected, Simulanka Durin had the same event of rampage as Dragonspine Durin. Both were also created by a hexenzirkel mage. The former being M as the goddess of fate and the latter being Rhine-daughter as one of the 5 sinners in Conria. Why I included their associated terms is because it all connects to the same nature of what triggered their rampage. But for Simulanka Durin, although we know that his acts of destruction were caused by the grief or loss of his creator, the prophecy wrote him off as the evil dragon. And mind you, the prophecy is pretty much the encompassing fate of the heroes and the people living in the world of Simulanka. It was the establishing of fate that the name Durin is tied with. That is shared by both Durins of Dragonspine and Simulanka. And if we treat Simulanka like a simulation, we'd notice that there is a strong parallel to Dragonspine Durin and Rhine-daughter being among the 5 sinners. Remember that Dragonspine Durin's rampage happened during the Cataclysm, the same event that doomed Conria, and is the same piece of history that Celestia and the original Archons have been keeping confidential. Delving deeper into the event of the Cataclysm, it's also where all of Teyvat had major losses, and where everything went under the threat of the Abyss, corrupting many of its inhabitants. Durin is one of the corrupted beings during the time of the Cataclysm, and despite being good-natured in the beginning, he was still painted as the enemy given that the corruption took control of him. But despite all those tragedies, he's still indebted to the people of Mondstadt, quoting that he sees the events of his rampage as a very long dream, in which he sang and danced with the Volin, Barbados, and the people of Mondstadt. Simulanka's prophecy would be a nudge to the events of the Cataclysm up until the present timeline, where the 7 Archons rule under the established order of Celestia. If you recall the prophecy, it quotes, "The hero from another world supported by their companions shall restore peace to this world." And reading it carefully, we would realize that everything about Simulanka Durin was omitted. Even the evil dragon's rampage wasn't stated. Don't you think this is similar to the kind of propaganda that Celestia is pushing? Throughout the traveler's journey, we are only putting the puzzle pieces together in regards to anything related to the Abyss and the sibling. Even with the Archons, especially Venti and Zhongli, we could tell that they are hiding quite a number of things from us related to the Abyss and the Cataclysm. We only get to know more about the Cataclysm as we play through the Traveler quests, in which it is said to be linked to the truth of this world. If Simulanka is to be treated as a world in itself, then the truth that the prophecy is hiding is Durin's innermost desire. If only we get to know more about the Cataclysm through the Traveler's questline, then Wanderer would be Simulanka's parallel, being the only one to uncover Durin's existence. And speaking of Durin's existence, his story also happens to be a striking resemblance of Wanderer's overall story from his former existence as Kabukimono, to which it may seem coincidental, but take note that it was Alice who was said to have brought the featured characters into the world of Simulanka. Could it be that Alice sees potential among these characters that they would be able to solve whatever crisis is troubling Simulanka? It seems to me that Wanderer being there is also quite intentional for Alice, but knowing her enigmatic presence, I could only say that she has her own reasons, and I got it figured out, to which I will reveal more about it later. Interestingly, the Cataclysm was also hinted through M's passing, in which it manifested as a major loss for Durin that drove him mad enough to cause destruction. And like I said, the circumstances surrounding both M and Rhine-daughter's motives in creating their respective Durins are quite parallel to each other. But I also noticed something when B gave M a warning in regards to creating Simulanka Durin. You might say I'm overthinking this part, but B, being the goddess of prophecy, could be linked to the natural causality of the events that happened in the Cataclysm. Think about it. Forbidden knowledge is a force to be reckoned with. Almost anyone who tries to tread through that subject is approaching it with utmost caution, because the same abyssal influence is what caused the Cataclysm. In any more specific event, it's what corrupted Durin that made him go on a rampage. So prophecy can be seen as an aspect of causality, where if an abyssal thing is involved, it would lead to destruction. That's already common knowledge, as we know. For both Simulanka Durin and Dragonspine Durin, their namesake each holds a piece of prophecy. What differs them from each other is their own respective unfolding of fate, where Simulanka Durin was saved while Dragonspine Durin has gone to his end with his remains resting in Dragonspine. In the afterword, Albedo revealed that the Dragonspine counterpart might come back to life as an effect of the unfolding of Simulanka Durin's fate. Coming back to life, huh? Kinda sounds synonymous with a certain resurrection word. But didn't I say last time that resurrection is not about restoring someone back to life? Well, when you think about it, when we saved Simulanka Durin, his physical manifestation was altered into that of Mini Durin. And not only that, Mini Durin's character had a 180-degree shift into that of an optimistic, joyful dragon. If the namesake establishes a parallel link, then it's very likely that Dragonspine Durin will come back as its version's former glory, free from the corruption of the abyss and the cataclysm. And to be honest, I'm not even gonna be surprised if we see a playable Durin. But going back to the names, Teyvat seems to have made use of name manipulation to hack through the corruptive causality, and we have seen how this sort of glitch in the Matrix manifest in prior events of the story. Take Sumeru for example. The only way to get rid of the Withering is to erase Rukkhadevara's existence from Irminsul. Since Irminsul has direct influence on the ley lines, the forbidden knowledge corruption that is embedded with Rukkhadevara contaminates Irminsul, which causes the Withering to occur. The traveler still remembers Rukkhadevara and she still exists through him, but Teyvat isn't really affected by that because they are a descender. They don't belong to this world. They are the most likely entity who can bypass causality completely. Yet we can't really mention the name, not even to Nahida, because the name itself had abyssal association already. If we do, we'll just contaminate Irminsul again. But in Fontaine, it was different. We weren't fully in the driving seat to steer the storyline of Fontaine. However, if you paid closer attention to the prophecy in Fontaine, it works just like the one in Simulanka. But instead of an encrypted prophecy, Fontaine deals with a decisive prophecy, one that is decided upon by Celestia. And being the nation of justice, we were able to have an objection to overrule the verdict through the help of Fossalor's master plan and Monsieur Neuvillette. Have you wondered why the verdict during Farina's trial didn't mention the name Farina nor Fossalor in the guilty verdict, and instead it was the Hydro Archon? This was actually part of Fossalor's mind-boggling debate on the heavenly principles. She abused the name hack, knowing that if she sentenced herself as Fossalor, she will only waste the 500 years worth of energy harvesting from the oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale, because it would execute only her. There would be another Archon to replace her, which will just validate the prophecy even more. In another situation, when we try to give Wanderer a new name, we are not allowed to name him with something that already exists. I know Hoyo refrains from name duplicity, but I believe that it's actually pretty significant in lore. You cannot even name him Kabukimono or Kunikuzushi or Scaramouche because those are the names that he discarded by Irminsul erasure. He knows that if he's named after those once again, he will just continue the painful fate that his former self endured. Similarly, if he were to be named the same to other characters like Nahida, Nilou, or Navia, it's likely that his life events will be intertwined with the life of the aforementioned characters. Just a funny thought, by the way. But names aren't only significant for manipulation purposes, since it's also being used for the affirmation of one's own fate. One good example is the nameless Yaksha who then we get to know as Bosacius. See now, it's blatantly in the term again. We know that Bosacius was the Yaksha who got lost in the darkness and went mad, but during the cutscene where he remembered his name, he was able to realize his commitment to his ultimate sacrifice. So with all the parallels regarding the names, the prophecies, and causality, it sets us up to how the name connects to what is brewing in the region of Natlan. We still have the agate gemstone to refer to in regards to the obscured name in the description. This leads me to my very first speculation. Natlan will pull off a reverse Rukkhadevata. That is to say that if during Sumeru, we had to erase Rukkhadevara's existence from Irminsul, we would do the opposite in Natlan, where we would have a crucial someone remember their name. And whoever that crucial someone is, their name could be the same as the obscured text from the agate gemstone description. And it looks like Natlan would need a parallel hero to achieve that someone's truth. If we consider the last few scenes in the Ignition teaser, there is this part where Mavuika said the lines, "Did you catch everything?" followed by a visual hint of what seems to be a perspective of being on the verge of fainting. Okay, let me tell you, when we were about to reach the final area of Simulanka where we confronted Durin, the team fell off a cliff and then was saved by Wanderer. Of course, at the time, we were filled in with a couple of words in a cutscene, but Wanderer explained that the mist has hallucinatory effects. Those same hallucinations also contain the deepest emotions of Simulanka Durin, to which only Wanderer gets to witness, meaning that the fainting visual hint in the Ignition teaser was a hallucination scene, and the one getting the hallucination is the Traveler. To cut to the chase, case, the Traveler will be the hero counterpart in Natlan. Let me explain. In the Travail trailer, Dainsleif mentioned that when the God of War shares the secret of the rules of war to the Traveler, it is because she has her reasons. I also did mention a while ago that Alice had her own reasons in picking Wanderer as the hero, and that I got it found out. Well, we've been talking about parallels, and Alice could have already known about Wanderer's past, even predating to his years as Scaramouche, because Hexenzirkel is an organization that conducts Irminsul explorations. Just like Nahida, they could witness every Irminsul activity. With this knowledge, Alice put Wanderer on the hero role, allowing him to resonate with Simulanka Durin's emotions given their shared bond over losses and betrayals. No other character has this kind of narrative. But how does this explain the Traveler becoming the hero of Natlan? If we look at the tribes correspond to the different elements. The game has 7 elements, but the tribes only have 6. It could be implied that the supposed 7th tribe corresponds to Pyro, and it is instead the one that oversees the war. Mavuika's entrance in the teaser also signals to her hosting the present year's tournament, and at a certain part, she said the lines "take your positions," so she assigns the so-called positions in this particular tournament, and it hits as a close parallel to Alice delegating the roles to the featured characters in Simulanka. Now, what does this say about Mavuika and the Natlan conflict? One possibility I see is that aside from Mavuika hosting the tournament, she might also be the one that instigates war to occur between 2 or more tribes. Yes, I believe that there is also a war going on outside the tournament that parallels the tournament itself. Since we are talking about conflict, I do think that Natlan would have 2 existing conflicts. These would be subsequential, with the former conflict escalating things towards the latter. These 2 conflicts would likely revolve around the Saurians and the Primal Fire. Dragons have also been the focal point in Simulanka, being that its story revolves around a misunderstood dragon who is ostracized by his world. And in return for saving that dragon, we have likely changed the fate of the other dragon who shares its name. In Natlan, we have been introduced to the Saurians, which are dragons that have undergone long years of evolution. And it never fails to cross my mind that when we talk about Saurians, I have a subconscious theory that they could be loosely related to the Sovereigns and the Bishops by kinship. Heck, I even thought that Saurians might have their heritage in the Light Realm for that same case. However, I'll keep the subconscious theory relevant to this part, because chances are very high that the Pyro Sovereign will get some plot involvement in the Archon quest, considering how we left off Fontaine with Nouvelette's involvement. Going back to the Saurians, it was also implied that they are pretty much domesticated in the present times, quoting that they are subservient to and abused by people from Natlan. If we go through one of the titles among the drip marketed characters, Kinich goes by a Saurian hunter affiliation. In the same information provided by the wiki, an example quotes that a man was condemned to death for protecting his tribe Saurians sometime in the past. So there's our first possible source of conflict. There are people who want to preserve and protect the Saurians, while there are others who want to hunt them down. We might not know yet the reason on why certain tribes have their own respective agendas with the Saurians, but this definitely has something to do with the different rules of the tribes, and there will be no other way to settle this conflict but through war, and Mavuika could be the one that facilitates it. The nature of these Saurians and how they came to be might also be linked to the Pyro Sovereign in the same way as how the 2 Durins are linked to each other by namesake. The second possible source of conflict is the tournament itself, and I think the Saurian conflict will precede this. The thing about the tournament is that it's something held annually, and if it's seasonal, then there must be something special as to why this is being held. I mean, the tournament setting is in a large arena with a giant cauldron of fire. It wouldn't make sense to say that this is not where the Primal Fire rests. But what's the deal with the Primal Fire? Given the narratives of Sumeru and Fontaine, the Primal Fire could be a plot agent similar to the Withering in Sumeru and the Primordial Sea in Fontaine, natural forces that involve an ancient power. But closely take a look at these 2 terms, Primordial Sea and Primal Fire. It's easy to just conclude that the words primordial and primal mean the same thing, but even outside the context of vocabularies, these 2 words fit just right with the lore of their respective region. The Primordial Sea, the fundamental makeup of Oceanids. It's where memories converge and emotions form collectively. It's an ancient element that is capable of dissolving anything made of the same primordial waters. Through the lens of nature, it would be the very basic form of Fontanian matter. The Primal Fire would not have the same context. Given that Natlan has Saurian coexistence, it adds up as an evolutionary term, which is my initial interpretation when I try to distinguish the 2 words from each other. Primal is more tied to living consciousness, while primordial is more tied to natural causality. Plus, in psychology, Freudian theory defines primal as a link in between behaviors to suggest the origin of emotional life. If you think about it, Simulanka Durin already foreshadowed this aspect of primal. The destruction that he had caused has stemmed from an experience of grief. This same grief was preceded by experiences that led to it. One would be the loss loss of his creator, and another being the misunderstandings and mistreatment that he gets from people. The influences on his actions were caused by primal emotions, which, if we look at Dragonspine Durin, parallels the prophecy or the causality of the abyss and the corruption. The Primal Fire is what keeps Natlan at a state of war. For one, it could complement the desires of the people, much like Fontaine with Hydro complementing the concept of memories. If the tribes are constantly at war amongst each other, it could also be that the tribes have different desires, probably originating from a primal value that their respective ancestors upheld. At some point, it could even be oppositional. With their Saurian correspondences, these would be the source of misunderstandings and mistreatments. The Primal Fire could also be the wish-granting tool that would bestow the prize for the tournament champion. This is where wish and desire become really important, because why is it that the Simulanka crisis has been resolved when Wanderer made the evil dragon remember his name being Durin? It's because it's connected to his wish, the same desire that came from the primal emotion of love that his creator, the goddess of fate, had left for him. He was told to be kind to everyone, and so he tried, only to be outcasted. But the moment he was reminded of his name, his corruption was dispelled, which also ultimately became the cause of the resurrection of Dragonspine Durin. This is also why the concept of name would be so important to Natlan, because for whatever name that is obscured in the agate gemstone, it might as well contain the primal desire that Natlan's collective would share upon, despite their many differences that sets them up for the never-ending wars. So right now, Natlan unites under the same culture of war. Suppose that they stop going to war with each other, what do you think will happen? Well, the very possible outcome is that Natlan might end up being subject to the abyssal corruption, just like the withering situation in Sumeru. Without their desires igniting it, the Primal Fire either becomes lost to the abyss encroachment, or it goes out of control and causes chaos in Natlan itself. I refuse to jump into the conclusion that the Primal Fire is a fatalistic or protective force, but all these wars and infighting could be viewed as some sort of an offering to the Primal Fire, could either work as a preventive or appeasement method. Now here comes the interesting part. So far in the Traveler's Journey, each Archon quest has their own distinct pool of themes that complements the nation's storytelling. Mondstadt revolved around dealing with the Valen's bondage as a complement to being the nation of freedom. Liyue had Zhongli to forge a contract that would emancipate his people to be independent in their handling of crises. Inazuma was about aggressive totalitarianism that actively upholds the Vision Hunt decree to preserve eternity. Sumeru tackled issues relating to the dissemination of information and the unwise hoarding of knowledge. Fontaine had Farina perform an act to conceal Fussalor's plan of justice to save the nation. Now we are in Natlan, the nation of war, and to be succeeded by Snezhnaya, whose Fatui harbingers aim to seize authority from the gods. Take note of these 7 words corresponding to the 7 nations. Since we are trying to speculate the source of conflict and how it will unfold, let's go back again to the concept of causality or prophecy. And out of all the nations that we've gone through, we have to see Fontaine if we want to examine the concept of prophecy, similar to how B embodied it in Simulanka. Back in Fontaine, we were able to talk to Mona about the prophecy, and knowing her, we can tell that she's a serious astrologer who wouldn't just go out of her way to ascertain destinies. But if we do try to ascertain the Archon quest of each nation, these words could be associated with the 7 classical planets in astrology. If we were to assign each one to each region, Mondstadt would be Jupiter because of freedom and overindulgence. Liyue would be Moon because of the dependence to Zhongli and the Adepti who have long protected them in crises. Inazuma would be Saturn because of its restrictions and rule over the perception of time. Sumeru would be Mercury because of the movement and also limitations of information. Fontaine would be Venus due to its dramatic approach to trials and its performing arts. Natlan would be Mars because of its raging war. Lastly, Snezhnaya would be Sun because of its desire to seize authority in the name of the god that they only revere, the Tsarita. If you know about each planet's debilitation or fall signs, you could somehow get behind my logic that these also correspond to the events of each region's Archon quest. Jupiter is debilitated in Capricorn, a sign that is associated with discipline and responsibility, which we can relate to the concept of control. And in Mondstadt, we deal with freeing the Valen from the control of the Abyss Order. Moon is debilitated in Scorpio, a sign that is associated with death, linkages, and intense intimate merging. And Zhongli, with his fake death, expressed his insight that the people in Liyue should start standing up on their own without depending on the gods. Saturn is debilitated in Aries, a sign that is associated with initiative and impulses. Wars have erupted in Inazuma between the resistance and the shogun's army, and in the end, A has realized that eternity doesn't have to be dictated according to her own initial perception only, but it's also shared with the masses, so she had to learn how to lead without just having the shogun automate orders. Mercury is debilitated in Pisces, a sign that is associated with dreams, illusions, and the hidden. Nahida has been kept hidden in the sanctuary for anyone anyone to know about, as a result of the sage's extreme fanaticism over Ruka Devata, where they drown in their illusions while failing to see the reality that the withering is already making an impact. Venus is debilitated in Virgo, a sign that is associated with nature, animals, and the details. The prophecy in Fontaine isn't something that can be comprehended by sheer logic and details. It comes with an awareness that all Fontainians came from a source of nature as creatures of Oceanids. Now we have Natlan. Mars is debilitated in Cancer, a sign that stands for family, home, ancestry, emotions, the mother, and foundations. Tribes are families of their own, and even if they have different family dynamics, the entirety of Natlan would eventually have to realize that they all share the same heritage, same home, and same ancestry. Their story would have to progress by unfolding their foundations and past, retrieving their lost history, remembering their names, and getting to the bottom of their emotions and desires. Only then would they be able to forge their own fates, based on the collective wish that they uphold from understanding their history. This wish would be realized with the help of their hero, the Traveler. At some point, the Traveler will take part of certain tribes, adopt their name, and change its fate in the tournament as a paralleled outsider, just like how Wanderer changed the fate of Dragonspine Durin. Mavuika will let the Traveler feel the same emotion where they could both share the same understanding with. It could be that Mavuika has more answers to the Traveler's question about their sibling, and she understands it, with the possibility that she and Murata could also be twins. Who knows, it could also be that she understands what it is like to lose a twin. For the meantime, give yourselves a high five because there's always more to discover with Deep Dive. I'm Mercanique, and this is my verdict. Thanks for watching.